Hey, I'm Cody, and welcome. This is my very first Booktube video. I've been kind of lurking around Booktube as a viewer for a while now, and I figured I would give it a go because I saw this very fun book tag thing, the Spoopy Book Tag, which was created by Book Tag You're It. And I thought, hey, what a perfect way to sort of dive into Booktube than talk about spoopy books, which I love. I'm a giant horror fan, as you can see by my books behind me. I love horror, and I thought it'd be really fun to jump into Booktube by talking a little bit about horror. So I'm going to dive right in and get through the 13 prompts for the Spoopy Book Tag. Again, it was written by Book Tag You're It, which I'll put some links down below. And here we go. Prompt number one, a book that scared you while you were actively reading the words on the pages. That book for me would be Gerald's Game by Stephen King. Back when the book came out, I was super anticipating this book. I am still a giant Stephen King fan, but at the time I was obsessed with Stephen King, all things King, and I was dying for this book to come out. So when I finally got my hot little hands on the hardcover copy of Gerald's Game, I read the entire thing in one night. And if you know the book, no spoilers here, but if you know the book, there's a scene sort of like toward the end of the book when things are getting like really intense, and the main character realizes that she has to get out of her situation because there's someone who's out to get her. That moment of realization, I lost my mind. Completely scared the crap out of me. And I remember I was in my bed. It was in the middle of the night, maybe like 3 a.m, and I read that scene, and I knew there was no sleep for me after that. I was completely terrified. Completely terrified. So Gerald's Game by Stephen King. Prompt number two, a book that you didn't find scary while reading it, but after you had the time to think about it and sit with it, you became frightened, scared, or creeped out. So that's a book, a more recent book. It's The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, which is maybe like my favorite horror book of 2020. Really fantastic novel. There's so much fun horror in it. Some like really great kind of gross out moments, a lot of like creeping terror, lots of supernatural stuff happening. And I just remember reading it, like I had a great time reading the book because Stephen Graham Jones is a phenomenal writer, and he has such like a really unique writer's voice. I was just like loving the book. Once I was finished it, I was very moved by the whole thing. It's got a lovely ending. But I gotta tell you, that book stuck with me. I was thinking about it all the time after I finished reading it, and it just, to me, got kind of creepier and creepier the more that I thought about it. Okay, prompt number 3, a book that was so creepy that you still think about a scene from it years later. Okay, I just recently reread this book out of a burst of nostalgia. It's called The Dollhouse Murders by Betty Wren Wright. I read this book as a wee one, elementary school probably, and it's a terrific book if you haven't read it. It's like a super creepy book for kids. But there's a dollhouse in it, and there's some like spooky shenanigans going on in the dollhouse that will help the protagonist Amy sort of uncover the secrets of a family secret, and the book is fantastic. But the very first scene in the book where Amy notices something really weird is going on in the dollhouse is a super creepy. The super creepy scene, and it has literally stuck in my brain forever. I couldn't remember the name of the book, but a friend of mine recently sort of said the name, The Dollhouse Murders, and I was like, oh my god, it's that creepy dollhouse book with the dolls doing the thing in the dollhouse. So The Dollhouse Murders by Betty Wren Wright. Prompt number 4, a book that you couldn't finish because it was either too creepy or too gory. I don't have a book for this. Because I don't have a book for this. There's never been a book that's either been too scary or too gory for me not to finish it. I live for horror, for all kinds of horror, like everything from just sort of like slow, creepy, atmospheric, moody stuff to wild splatterpunk horror nightmares. I love it all. So I don't have a book for this one. I generally don't finish a book if I'm not really digging it, and not because it's too scary or too gory. So prompt number 4, sorry, no book for you. Okay, prompt number 5. The scariest, creepiest book you've read based on a cult or group of people with sinister values and goals. Um, so this one's nonfiction, and the book is Helter Skelter, which is all about Charles Manson and the Manson family and those murders. Um, I I was a very precocious reader, so I read this book at a completely inappropriate time in my life. I read this book probably when I was maybe like 8th grade or ninth grade. Like I should not have been reading Helter Skelter when I read Helter Skelter. But I did. And it remains like a nonfiction book that completely disturbed me, and I was obsessed with it, but I was also completely freaked out by it. So Helter Skelter, don't read Helter Skelter at an appropriate age, young people. Okay, so prompt number 6. A horror book that takes place in an otherworldly location. So I'm going to kind of like bend the rules a little bit here. I'm going to say The Good House by Tananarive Due. So The Good House takes place in what is not really an otherworldly location. It takes place mostly in The Good House, this sort of house that's at the center of the story and has a lot of like really dark supernatural history. But that's the otherworldly component that I love so much about The Good House. So The Good House sits on this land where there's a very sort of like deep rooted supernatural dark history. There's something really scary and ancient going on the grounds of the Good House, and only bad things happen in the Good House. And Tananarive Due's book, I mean, Tananarive Due is an amazing writer, and if you haven't read her stuff, you should absolutely read her stuff. And The Good House is my favorite of her books. A really super terrific haunted house book, but also everything in the book is just lovely. So The Good House by Tananarive Due. Prompt number 7, a horror book where the main characters have to be or do something horrific in order to do what they deem as right or necessary. Second appearance for Stephen Graham Jones on this list, his novella Night of the Mannequins. So this is a rather new release, and I loved Night of the Mannequins. Sort of like it's an ode to slasher stories, but the central character has to do some really messed up stuff in order to do what he thinks is right and to protect his friends. He's doing it to protect his friends, but it gets really dark and twisted. It's an enormously fun read. You know, like The Only Good Indians, which I talked about earlier by Stephen Graham Jones, is like a really heavy, very like deep, big novel, and Night of the Mannequins feels like you're on a roller coaster. It's a roller coaster. It's a thrill ride. It's a dark, bloody, awesome, fun time. So, Night of the Mannequins, Stephen Graham Jones. Number 8, your favorite horror book that takes place in the summer. I'm gonna say Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings. So Fly Away takes place in Australia, the small town in Australia, and the protagonist, she thinks her 2 brothers are missing, and they sort of potentially show up, so she has to go searching for these 2 brothers that she thought was lost. And in this journey, she uncovers all of these sort of dark secrets of the past for her family, but also these dark secrets and these weird folkloric kinds of stories that take place in and around the town that they live in. Fly Away is a beautiful book. And the prose is stunning, the stories are creepy and lovely, and it all takes place in the summer. It's a super bright day all the time. It's not like dark, shadowy in the woods. All of the horror and darkness of Fly Away takes place in the light. So, Fly Away by Kathleen Jennings. Number 9, a horror book that felt like you were actually watching or reading the script for a classic horror movie. Okay, this one is easy. It's Clown in a Cornfield by Adam Cesar. This book is a blast, and like it feels like it was written so that it could be turned into a movie. Clown in a Cornfield is exactly what you think it's going to be. There's a cornfield, and there's some kids, and there's a clown, and he's not there to make people happy. Clown in a Cornfield is like a die-hard slasher novel. Weirdly written for teens. It's a YA novel, but it certainly reads entertainingly for adults as well. It's got the pacing and the spirit of a classic 80s slasher. It's a ton of fun. If you dig slasher movies, you absolutely have to read Clown in a Cornfield. Okay, prompt number 10. A horror book that's not scared to utilize modern technology, i.e., mobile phones, internet, social media, robotics, etc. Okay, this book comes out in October, October 2020, and it's fantastic. It's called Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. What's really cool about Plain Bad Heroines is that it is both a novel that takes place in the past, sort of at the turn of the 20th century, 1910s, at a girls' school, where a couple of mysterious deaths happen at this all-girls school, and another narrative that runs alongside it, a film crew in the present is making a film version of a book that was written about those deaths from the 1910s. And there's a lot of use of like Instagram and social media that's part of the contemporary story. Plus, they're also making a film, so you have all of that like contemporary like film Hollywood stuff going on in the contemporary story, and it's balanced with this creepy story that takes place at Brookhaunts is the name of the school. Brookhaunts, all school for girls in the story in the past, and I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed Plain Bad Heroines. I loved this book. I'm not normally a very quick reader, and I was very intimidated by the size of this book. It's a big book. It's like over 600 pages, and that's big for me because I'm not like a really fast reader. But I devoured this book. Danforth creates these two deliciously fun worlds. The very sort of creepy kind of like Edward Gorey illustration world of the past, and this really smart contemporary story that is just like an absolute delight. Plain Bad Heroines is a fantastic book, so make sure that you grab it when you can. It's great. Prompt number 11. A horror book that was written before the year 2000 that you felt was ahead of its time. Okay, so I just want to like bend the rules here too and not pick one book, but just pick a body of work. Octavia Butler. I mean, straight up, I mean, yes, it's really more speculative fiction in general, so you can kind of like place her in other categories. But I would 100% say Octavia Butler is a person that I think should come up in every single conversation about horror fiction ever, because she is amazing and spectacular, and her work is wildly inspirational, and everyone should be reading Octavia Butler. If you want like a good horror entrance into the work of Octavia Butler, I would say The Fledgling. It's a vampire novel, and I think it's just spectacular. So in general, who's the greatest of all time? Octavia Butler, one of the greatest of all time as far as I'm concerned. Okay, prompt number 12. A book that you feel greatly changed or influenced the horror genre for years to come. Okay, I am going to break the rules once again because I don't care. And I'm going to, instead of picking a book, I'm going to pick a person. And it's the editor, Ellen Datlow. Ellen Datlow has probably had a hand in like every horror book, any horror anthology specifically that you have ever loved and enjoyed. Ellen has probably had a hand in it. Ellen is legendary, and everything she touches is chef's kiss. Wonderful. She's an amazing editor. She has this incredible eye for talent, and knows horror better than anybody, honestly. Her best of the year horror anthologies are always filled with like incredible short stories. I think about her anthology of ghost stories with Saga Echoes, which if you haven't gotten that, it is a stunning collection of short stories that are all ghost stories. She's got a collection out now called Final Cuts, which is all kind of new stories from a bunch of really amazing authors about Hollywood horror. Ellen's like imprint is all over contemporary horror, and if you love what's happening in horror, you probably owe a good deal of what you love to Ellen Datlow. So shout out to Ellen Datlow. And last but not least, prompt number 13, a horror book that is so unique that you've yet to come across anything like it. I know that she's not really a big fan of being considered like a genre writer or like being specific about genre, but I want to shout out Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. That collection of stories is the most like fascinating genre bending book of scary stuff that I have really ever read. I feel like Carmen Maria Machado is one of the most unique voices in writing right now. Particularly the way that she crafts genre stories that go into all these other places, and I don't want to say like exceeds the genre or breaks out of genre, because like I love genre stuff clearly, but what she's doing just creates these unexpected worlds inside genre stories that take you to places you never really thought you were going to go, and they stick with you and sit inside you and completely freak you out. Her Body and Other Parties is like an amazing collection of stories, and if you're unfamiliar with her work, I 100% recommend Her Body and Other Parties. All right, so yeah, we did it. Hey, friends, we survived it together. We survived my very first Booktube video. The Spoopy Book Tag was written by Book Tag Year It, talking all about horror, a thing that I love more than anything, really. So thanks for watching the video. I'll continue to be talking about genre books. Horror, definitely, but since I really just love genre fiction in general, I'm probably going to do some science fiction. I've kind of recently gotten into romance, and I'll probably talk a little bit about romance, and just talk about books that I'm reading and loving. So thanks. Subscribe, if you will, and I'll see you in the next video.